everybody? Welcome to the Wells Group. This is In Your Feelings, and we got our topic is
Black culture.
And how y'all feel about it.
And do we
Black people have a culture?
And when we talk about, we're talking about the African American descendants of slaves.
Yes.
Okay. Do
Black Americans have culture?
Or African Americans? Blacks are a social construct.
Black Americans, but I'm talking about.
Okay. Yes.
I like black better.
Me too. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Really? So what's black?
Well, I think black is easier to identify. Oh, Pan-African wise, because I mean,
We can go Pan-African.
So if we go Pan-African instead of using all these different countries, we're black. To me, it's simpler.
Yeah.
Now, it's not as accurate as
That's
African
really
American, but I think it's an easier identifier for all of us because I mean, it's more than just African American. I mean, you start talking about Pan-African, but for this segment, we're talking
descendants
about
of slaves.
right. We're talking about African Americans.
So, do we have a culture?
Yes.
Okay, so elaborate.
Can I first ask, how do you define culture?
That's a good way to start.
That's a great
So, would you like to define it because you had a lot to say
yeah,
prior to?
I'm waiting on.
We
Because
start
you-
here.
because-
So, okay, define culture.
No, I'm
Can somebody,
asking you because
hold on.
we gave the formal definition and you. Go ahead.
No,
Can
I
you-
gave a definition. I can
Can
pull
you
it up.
can
Okay,
you give the
yeah.
formal? You gave the Z on. Can you
That's all
give the
different
formal
levels of
definition, please?
The art,
The second one, probably.
the second one, okay.
It's the
The custom, arts, social institutions, and achievements of a particular nation, people, or other social groups.
okay. So
That's-
customs,
Mhm.
the
Arts.
the arts,
The
Art.
customs, arts, social institutions,
social institutions,
achievements
achievements.
Yes.
of a particular nation,
Okay.
people, or social group.
Okay.
And what was the one that you? There's another one that you. I just
That
wanted
did.
to be.
And, is that A, B, C, and D on there? Because it was D, I believe. So while she looks that up, and this
And read C too.
this debate online caught fire, and there's a lot of different views on this. So we're going to just share some of our views on how we feel about Black people having,
And
or
culture,
African American having a culture here.
In America.
It is tough for me. It's tough to even say we have a culture because people can't even agree on what we're called. We're Negro at one time. We're Black at one time. We're African American.
But that's
We
what
don't-
somebody's
We
calling
don't
you.
again. So what do we call
But
it?
if we're saying we have, if I
Okay.
feel I have a culture, it doesn't matter what somebody's calling me.
No, I'm saying we can't even agree on what we're called.
But if I feel I have a culture,
I hear
I feel as a Black American that I have culture.
So-
that there's things that.
Are we having a group of one, or are we talking about our as
That's
a whole?
But that's
As a whole.
People,
Yeah.
people as a
All right,
whole.
so here's what I was gonna write.
Okay.
As a whole, Black people in this country are the most powerful force for culture in the world has ever seen. Now, the issue is ownership. So I see where both sides are coming from. We constantly create culture, like no one's ever seen, from blues to jazz to rock to fashion to sports and how people play them to how people move in society to the slang that everyone talks with. In Japan, they're doing trap music. I mean, like that starts with us, but we don't own it. So that's why we're constantly forced to create new culture because we were never given. We were like the little brother. That and the big we would find something cool outside, we bring it back like look at this rock, and our big brother would just come punch us, beat us up, take the rock and say this is my rock.
Yeah.
So that's how culture is for us. So but we're so cool, right, that we go back outside and get something else. Look at this stick I got.
Yeah.
Big brother said, oh, that's a cool stick. Boom, give me that. So that's to me what happens with Black culture. We constantly at this point now we make stuff we don't even care about it. We're like you can have that. Or you think Taylor Swift had twerking? Cool. You can have that. We'll do something. We'll do this over here. Or you want to do that dance? You want to put that dance in Fortnite? We don't even care.
Beards.
The whole beard thing. Like everything we do, they take and they monetize, and we never own. So the thing that we have to change is ownership of our culture.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think that's where the
But
big
how do we
misconception.
own it? How do we own it?
Well, this is the first time ever, and this is what big plug for myself. This is what my whole project Voodoo Man's about: is how do we own our own culture? How do we go about taking the steps. And it's the first time in history we could do that because we were so disenfranchised before. We weren't considered people. We weren't considered citizens. We're finally in the fight for equality, and people don't realize that because they made us think that the civil rights movement was for equality. It wasn't.
Yeah.
That's for citizenship. But now we're fighting for equality, and that's where we can start to say, this is our culture. You can borrow from it, but you got to pay it something.
I have a question. So, we talked about creating things. Okay, so usually a small group will create something. Say blues is created by a small group. A small group doing something, does that make it a culture for the whole?
Like you said,
say,
culture
they
being
blues,
passed down, right?
And then and other people took it,
Right.
and they expanded upon it.
Mm-hmm.
That was for whoever made the small group who made blues is cool, but that wasn't a cultural.
It
was
was at a time. Everything with us is time limited until white people take it.
Take it.
Like and we know that because like we'll be like, all right, once we see like the news anchors doing the dance, like all right, that's okay. So like that, but that's how it's always been. So like blues was popping for like 50 years really. And it didn't reach mainstream success until the European dudes was listening to records and brought it over, like the Rolling Stones and Led Zeppelin. They were like, and they didn't even understand why these groups weren't huge, but because they don't understand systemic, like, white American racism is very specific. So that was a time limit on that. So then we had jazz, you got like Miles Davis. Miles Davis is a perfect example of somebody who just like created stuff and just kept it moving when people took it. Like he created that whole Kind of Blue was a landmark jazz album. Once Chet Baker heard that and started doing it, they called it West Coast jazz. Like he didn't do it in New York. And so he's like, all right, I'm done with that. So he starts making electronic jazz. Like he's a perfect one single example of what black people go through like through centuries. And I'm sure it was happening, I can't remember what her name, Bessie something. Like they started making those whole big old fake booty dresses for white women based on her because like white girls ain't built like that. So like it's been happening forever. Yeah.
Over and over.
So I would still say is that culture?
Yes.
Is it culture or is it we're making things that are
So explain to us
cultural at that time? Meaning how are we passing this down? How are we using this? I mean, so you're saying culture is changing each era.
It shouldn't be. No, it shouldn't.
It shouldn't. How is that? But that doesn't mean we don't have it.
I feel like we do have it. I just feel like we do have culture because when you say the girls with the big butts, we'll say, and they'll say, "Oh, I'm trying to get a butt like a black girl."
Right.
Like they're saying it.
So your culture.
They're really
no.
Right.
No, but honestly, don't deny. Honestly, that's a part of our culture.
That's what I'm saying, though. But he'll say it like when we say soul food.
Genetics.
Genetics.
That's
not
And not all of us have it.
Yeah, we don't all have it.
You like those dances that our black culture normally does, and you see the white people do it, and it's funny to them because it's like, oh, y'all doing art dances.
Right.
So it's
for
made
example.
aware.
But you know what's funny is because I had this conversation with my kids and they don't see themselves as having a black culture. They feel it's more inclusive of all of them.
That's true.
And it doesn't matter about the race. It's
that's true.
The
But that's
American culture.
I think that's
But
what
I think they get at the same time because if a black boy did something and a white boy did the same thing, they're gonna laugh at the white boy like, oh, and make it more exciting because the white boy did it because it's something that a black.
America is a
I
melting
just have
pot.
an issue with culture.
You get what I'm saying? Like,
I think
we see
just
the
our
dances like
generation.
that. If we saw a black person do it, it'd be like, okay, but we see the white anchor man do it, it's like, oh, like,
I just think that our age group sees color more than the youth that's coming up because
I think that's every age group though. I don't think you see it until
you get out and learn more
mature
about
a little bit.
Because when we were growing up, we didn't really see it.
But I
as
feel
much.
like adults impose that in the system that the children. If you left it up to the children, it wouldn't be about race. It would just be about
It would
them.
eventually.
It would, because when your kids are out and the cops stop them.
But that's another generation. That's a different age group that I'm talking about.
No,
it's the parents of the children.
Well,
it's not the children themselves today.
Well, people always
they'll experience it as they grow.
As kids grow up, the next the more you get out, more you're on your own, then you'll start seeing
the real world.
They'll see you treat, because even if you're in school, you go to a white school, everything is cool.
Everything's cool to you.
Until it's something happens where it has to be a divide, where a black kid gets shot. And you're like, this kid got shot. And they're like, well, he
or you
shot
hear someone say something.
You're like, what?
Yeah.
Or you see groups of black kids hanging out, and you can clearly see the these are the predominantly the black kids in class, but they're always together.
Or like you're on
Like,
a
that's
team, right?
another
What if
team,
the black wrestler's on that team and his teammates and his coaches and his staff doesn't stand up for him when they're trying to cut his
Yeah,
hair.
but
So
I think
it shows itself.
I am a minority in this conversation because my culture, I identify with the Haitian culture.
Okay.
And we don't necessarily see ourselves being inclusive in when you talk about African Americans or the black culture. We see ourselves separate.
I understand that.
And because we have a food, we have a language,
Well,
we have history,
this is why it's specific, and this is one of the separations I wanted to make.
Well, we have food.
No.
Like,
But this is one of the separations I wanted to make between, like, when I said, like, we're all black. So, like, Haitian is black, Jamaican is black, Brazilian is black. Like, there's a large group of black people, but the African American experience is distinctly different because everything that we've ever made got melted into America. So and the interesting thing is America is a melting pot. So like, take Chinese people for example. They have their traditions and their culture, and they can share it with America. Like you can go get Chinese food, you can go to their festival, but you gotta pay for it. You know it's Chinese. This is the issue.
And
the biggest issue is that our kids don't know our culture is ours.
Yeah.
You understand? Like they think it's American, but it's not. The moonwalk's not American, that's black.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, what's a Haitian dish that has not been replicated or done over again?
Well, everything's been replicated.
No. Certain things have not.
Well, it's a piece of something.
I mean, people put their different spins on
Absolutely.
it, but
like
they're still
like
legume, griot, those type of
things. Now macaroni and cheese that got breadcrumbs on the top. So you get what I'm saying?
We have soul food, and you don't believe that
because it started with Black Americans.
Oh, slavery, yes.
Yes.
Chattel slavery was the worst type of slavery because it didn't allow you to keep anything from your prior cultures, okay? And it cut you off from where you were. Mm-hmm. So you're here, you basically started with nothing. Okay? You started with nothing. So then I think that we grasp everything we do, we try to say this is our culture. Because we're trying to fill a void.
Right,
okay?
no, that's very true.
We're trying to fill a void.
But here's what's interesting, right? So name another Haitian dish.
Pate.
And what is the origin of that language?
Oh, well, the patty, there's a mixture of languages.
It's a mixture of languages, right?
Yeah, so you have a little bit of Spanish.
Yeah, you have some Spanish. So even a distinct culture like Haitian culture is a blend of cultures. Absolutely. The difference is we can point to a region in which it originates. Now, when black people create culture, when you make hip hop, they say hip hop was created in New York, right? But now, if you're looking at it, right, it's a whole bunch of little Zans and little white boys out here doing hip hop, acting like hip hop is like the top 5 rappers right now are white. Like Post Malone is killing right now. Eminem just sold out again. So now do we own hip hop? Like that's my question. Do we really, are we making money off this, or are they co-opting? I'm watching this happen real time.
So, again, it goes back to this is African Americans are still young people.
Yes, very young.
We're young people. So I think I will always, like I said before, I think we're developing our culture.
But that doesn't mean we don't have it.
And I think that we don't have anything we can agree upon.
We have.
I think we
have culture, but it's taken from us.
We have this taken from us, then it never.
We have to solidify.
You can't say it's never ours.
No,
we have culture.
It never became a conditioning. It never got conditioned into us. Like her culture will say it's conditioned into us.
Because she's had way more time.
Exactly.
You can't compare.
And by the way, I'd like to put the plug that Haitians were the first African Americans to have their freedom. And they came to America and helped other people fight for their freedom.
Big facts.
I got a lot of respect.
What I'm saying, not comparing. What I'm saying is why we have to understand that we're still trying to get our footing.
That's fine, but we do have things.
The thing is, I don't think we have. I think we're trying to. We're trying to get that.
And we started off on a rough start. So we're still wobbling our way up to where we need to be.
We've created a whole bunch of culture. We haven't owned it. I think that's what you're saying. We have to own our culture so that, and we're starting to do that. Like we're starting to And it's not even just culture.
Our culture got so big that people want it because it's a money making
Everybody.
culture. Like, everybody wants
But
it.
again, like I said,
So it's ours. It's just harder because money's involved in
it's still ours though.
It's
And
ours.
so we can say something
We
is
still originated. It's still
just because
stapled
you start
It's
something.
still stapled in us though.
But-
Like he's saying in hip hop, the top 5 rappers are white. But when you say hip hop, you don't think of white people. Still, it doesn't.
not at all.
So it's still ours,
I'm not.
regardless of what's going on right now. It's still ours.
So what are we passing down, or what are we passing
That's
on?
fine. You
I'm
can say
asking,
we
as
say we
culture,
don't have
what
things
is-
to pass down, but we still have other aspects of culture because it said arts.
We
in
have
the
culture.
definition.
Okay,
Arts is
so
you.
what arts
So-
do we
Trying
have?
to be the rapper.
We just
It's
arts.
art.
You know, music is arts, right?
What,
So
I'm
hip
asking,
hop.
what arts do we have?
Oh, you
Or
talking
just
about
talk
So I
about
said, are we passing that
Yes.
down? Because
like
even-
Jimmy Kennedy.
And they made
How
sure
long has hip hop been around? Breakdance and all and everything that just has evolved
Gotcha.
from our black culture.
again,
So,
from,
yeah.
I think from our black experience.
You're saying
I'm
it
not
like,
it's a
oh,
culture.
our parents have to
wasn't-
come to
it's-
say, here's hip hop.
Well, you know what the
I
other
mean,
issue is
that's
too?
culture.
The stuff.
No, you don't have
the
to
stuff
say
we-
it.
the
Like
stuff-
when you
You
say
say
that.
that, even
People mind
if
frame.
you go to and you're saying, oh well, Haitians do this and Irish people have that, you will not find all Irish people do this.
Right.
First of all, we're not talking about all. We're talking about a
If
majority.
Exactly.
nobody,
A majority.
When you
We're not
look
talking
at
about-
certain things, you know black people
There are
created
no
that.
absolutes.
When
There
you
are zero absolutes in the
see-
world.
Absolute-
All nobody can do
absolutely,
anything.
absolutely.
That's
and I
true.
get
When you
that.
see
But
certain
I'm
things,
saying
you know
to
black
you
people
is-
created it.
What I'm saying to you is, you're trying to make it seem as though soulful as a whole is not popular by a majority, and it is. By a majority, a
You don't
mass
value
amount of
yourself.
African Americans do identify and know what soul. If I say soulful, you know exactly what it is I'm talking about.
Wait a minute, time out.
But-
It's again Southern disease.
But that doesn't
Well,
matter.
No, wait.
But if you say, listen,
okay, can I talk? Can I
hold
talk?
on, can I
If we're saying
finish
this is
my?
our culture, and then we say it's something that's predominantly in the
That's where
South,
certain
but it's
things
not
start.
predominantly in the
No,
North.
it's
Not
predominant here.
in
It's where it
Chicago.
originated.
Can
It's
I
not.
ask? Can I?
Where are
this is what I'm
most
saying.
black people at in the South?
Wait a minute. This is what I'm saying. If I say soul food to a North American, they know exactly what types of food I'm
Yeah,
talking
I think
about,
it's-
right or wrong.
So if
It's
we're
part of
talking
black
about things that
culture.
are we
You're
talking about
separating
things that are
black people.
stereotypical, like they're saying
No,
that
It's
wait,
not
wait.
stereotypical. Soul food
Wait,
is not
time
stereotypical.
It's
No,
not.
first of all,
It's
if
a
you
fact.
look up, first of all, like fried chicken, if you look up where that came
Okay.
You know what's
If you
funny?
look
This
at
is
where that
exactly
came
how
from-
I read y'all Facebook comments too.
from,
Like,
yeah,
exactly.
if you looked at where it
I didn't
came
even
from,
see this.
it came from someone who saw a black politician back in the day with their feet up eating chicken,
Okay.
and they said that's the only person I've ever seen do it.
But you're saying
And
right
they
now
put it-
chicken. We're talking about soul
Okay.
food,
So
which is more than just chicken.
so what's soul food?
But
Black Eyed
probably
Peas.
don't
Black
know
Eyed
what
Peas.
cornbread
We
is.
started that tradition.
So soul food is all these foods.
It's the way it's prepared, a
Okay.
cuisine, because I'm sure they eat chicken, so it's the way it's prepared. That's what makes soul food soul food.
Okay.
The way we prepare is unique.
Again,
Black
I'm
people
telling you,
Black
I
Eyed
don't
Peas
think
now.
that's our culture.
It is our culture because
I would disagree with that because
that's
if you think
because-
of curry, you think of Indians. If you
Yeah.
think of
That's
platanos, then you think of maybe Hispanic people. If you
Right.
think of soul food, you're going to think of African American.
Okay.
Yes.
So
And you think of,
if I
if
think
you
of-
say
So you don't-
Chinese,
because
If I think of
you
ham
don't-
sandwich,
you're Asian.
yo,
But wait,
yo,
but you're talking
is that our
about.
culture too?
But
So
you.
we gotta take everything.
No, I don't identify as a black
No.
or white thing. I think I
No, no,
identify
but
with
I-
as a
hip hop
hood-
culture.
In a hood.
But hip hop
yeah.
is
But
black.
when hip hop, again, yes.
Hip
but
hop's
it's not-
urban.
so-
More
that's
urban.
And I look
But
at
that's
urban
When
because
they go
that's
to China and they think about if they from videos and they look at us and that's what we are. They look at
That
us.
we did
as
dress like that. Let's not act like we didn't dress like that.
Yeah.
Culture, but we did dress like that. Black people did dress like that.
There's a lot of
all,
different.
wait, no. All black people.
There's no
or-
absolutes.
There's
You
no
just had
absolutes.
that.
No,
You
what I-
just
no,
had
what
that
I mean is
conversation.
that-
So
what- no,
a lot of
stop.
black people
No.
dress like that.
A
Yes,
lot of black
they
people were
did.
young at that time.
Dressed like
because
that,
the
yeah.
older
So
black
when-
people didn't dress
So
that
when,
way. Remember
that's
that?
fine.
Because-
So when
so
they take
we had
that,
to-
they're dressing like black young
All right,
black
so here's-
Times
kids.
have changed,
so
culture
here's-
has
here's
changed.
the-
I
Times have
understand
changed.
that's part of
So
our- say that
the
was-
culture is young. So we're talking about like even we say hip hop the other day, which was created, cool, and that was part of that culture. But again, anybody before that who wasn't for that, are they not part of the culture? Did they not ride that
Okay,
wave?
they
You know what
are
I'm
part of the
saying?
culture.
Like they
And
they don't subscribe
do
to
you
rap
not
like
think?
that.
Do you not
or,
think that in her culture that there was a
That's
time where
why-
certain things started? There's a time when it starts. So the people pre the start would still be in.
That's
yeah,
why-
but when you
that's
think
why-
of culture, things are passed down
Hey, that's
from
what I'm saying.
That's
generation
why-
to
but that's
generation.
why-
But
I can see- I can see though, but with food, those recipes
But
were
that's why
passed
hip
down
hop.
through
That's why hip
generations.
hop is one of
But
the.
with the pants
So
sagging,
that's
no.
why hip hop is one
Yeah.
of the biggest things ever for black culture because you
I don't
got
think so.
all all the music that hip hop makes, right? It comes from past black music for the most part.
Yeah.
So like the 70s, you got like Parliament, Funkadelic, you got, Dad's Band, they sampled jazz albums. So you're getting this whole musical history. 1. 2, fashion. Like the fashion that was one of the things that was popular in how those kids dressed. That's not how everybody dressed. I mean, Prince dressed how he dressed. Nobody else did that. That's just how so it didn't create a culture. What Prince did. Hip hop changed how everybody dressed.
It changed the state of
it changed the state of
I remember how that younger generation.
Popular.
So what I'm saying is that our culture can't be considered.
So what you're talking about here is you're talking about cultural markers versus culture. So like pants sagging is a cultural marker for a specific point in time in hip hop history, but it doesn't represent the entire culture. But for a lot of people it does, because here's I think what's the issue that you're having with it. You don't want people took stereotypes from black people, from our culture, and use that as negative reinforcement. But they never looked at our whole culture as a whole. There's a lot of corny white people that'll see a black guy, yo, my brother. Yeah. Like, come on, man, you watch one Richard Pryor special, now you want to try to talk like that. Like, don't do that. Yeah. So, but that's just a cultural marker. It's not our whole culture.
So that's what I'm saying. Our whole culture. What is it? We have a lot of things where we add.
On the flip side, we do that too, right? So if I do this right, what you think?
I don't believe that's a cultural marker. Like someone would.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think there's.
It's a marker, but Asians as a whole, whatever they have a whole culture.
So for example, when Bruce Lee came out, like there's a whole special, and like a lot of Asians were talking about, everyone viewed them differently because they thought maybe they knew martial arts. Yeah. All Asian people don't know martial arts, but you don't know, so you don't be trying to fight them because you're not sure. Because Bruce Lee changed the perception. Yeah. But martial arts is a part of the Asian culture. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of it's the same thing. Like hip hop is part of our culture. It's not all of our culture.
So what is the bigger culture though?
Well, that's constantly.
I'm sure they have their traditional.
It's evolved. Exactly, it's evolved. So I think we have things that we added to the culture.
Our culture is new.
Yeah, we have added things.
I mean,
but I'm talking about
slaves were free not that long ago. There's other people who have a long
like I said, I think we have a lot more cultural, like I said, markers, things that we did that everybody
put out there. Is a food. So
but I just feel like we're very artistic. African Americans are very artistic people. Yeah. So our arts and our talent, people want them, so they adapt to them, they change it, and it's hard for us to kind of mold it into a culture.
Like I said, we let it go.
Because we're so artistic, we keep going.
So that's not a good thing.
So how was it at first?
Yeah. Used to doing the same thing that we've been doing.
Well, no, like I said, you guys bring up like jumping the broom, as you guys want to say something that was definitely taken and used at a certain time. But once they get married with rings, they kind of let that go.
But people still do it. So it's a part of, it's still a staple in our culture.
Do the minority of people do it, or the majority? You know what I mean?
I'm saying it's a part of our culture, so that would mean we have a culture. That means there's something there. You don't have to identify it, but it still exists.
That's something that some people did.
There's some people that people do because it still happens.
But you know what?
You may not. I don't know how many weddings you've been to last year or whatever, but people do.
Well, there's a lot of things.
Yeah, so black people do it.
Yeah, there's two things I think.
And they don't have to.
There's two things I think are happening here. I think the main thing he's trying to say is, black people in America are in desperate need for a culture that we own. Mm-hmm. We don't own a culture, and that's what I'm saying. That's what he's saying.
Can you explain to me what you mean by that? Like, because we don't have
because you could pinpoint a couple things that we do, like the
but that's a part of our culture.
Well, because
what's the bigger culture?
But what's her bigger culture? No, you tell, because you're saying
I'm not.
I know you're not a part of it, but
she's the expert on
what's the bigger part?
Because she's Asian.
I know she's an expert,
but I would say that I don't even know everything because I'm first generation born on U.S. soil. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the things, like the way we treat illnesses with certain herbs instead of going to a doctor, that's culturally been passed down, and I have to seek the older people, the elders, in order to pull that. But I don't know what, my husband, he says that African Americans, and he's not here, I wish he was because this is his topic, he says that African Americans don't have a culture. Because he tells me all the time, I get jealous that you have a language, that you have a tradition, that you have a place that you can connect back to.
And this is what I'm getting at. This is, we're all right. We want we are like, there's a jealousy of other cultures. There's a jealousy of being able to have our own language and have our own dialect. A lot more people are jumping the broom, right? Mm-hmm. So that I think there is a movement now towards trying to find our roots and find out where we came from.
Absolutely.
And I mean, when you start to do that research, you will be able to pinpoint a region. But that doesn't, at the same time, even when you figure that out, it doesn't take away from the stuff that we already built here.
Right. So are you willing to adapt to some of those cultures once you know them?
Well, again, that's what I said. I think people are.
I think
even my hair, I'm gonna be natural now. You know,
right.
We're doing things that you see these movies where people are getting more in touch with who we are as a people, and you see it all the time. Like, oh, this person got fired on the news because she wanted to wear her natural hair, and she's not gonna compromise anymore. Right. So we are awakening.
I feel like it will never be what it is in Africa, so that's why I feel like we are creating our own culture here as Americans, as Black Americans, because we will never be able to know exactly the country we came from.
And even if you find it, I don't think that people are going to be accepting.
Whether they're accepting of not, that's not home.
But here,
it's not home.
That's not home. And that's really what we're like, motherless children. We're a group of people that have no actual, we can't figure out
we don't have our own
land.
land.
People get upset when I say that, like, but we're new people.
Yeah, but it's true.
Because we come here and we intermingle, we change. We have no history really before.
Yeah.
Well, see, that's what I disagree with.
Well, I mean, that I'm saying, I mean history. I mean, we can't really track to where we exactly came from.
Right, you can't track to where exactly
what tribe we were taken from or what.
So
what
we
area.
can only speak of it in a general sense.
Right, very general.
We're here.
So like I'm sorry, you can go back to Haiti. Or, your mom's here. She can track. Say, we lived in this hut. This is our family. We lived on this street.
Well, see, even that,
we still own our land there, and we still have family.
You know what I'm saying? So,
but even Haiti though, Haiti was a slave colony, right?
Absolutely.
And they freed themselves.
Right.
So they had to deal with that. They had to deal with that whole thing as themselves.
But around that, they still were able to keep a lot of their practices.
This is exactly what my point is. This is exactly my point is. They created their culture there. The Haitian culture is a culture in itself. We have created multiple cultures. We just haven't been able to keep it and cultivate it and be like, this is ours.
Absolutely.
So that's the difference that we need to do. Like we can, and I'm all for going back to Africa, and I do believe that we need to all unite. And I'm very Pan-African. I think that Black people, if you're melanated, listen. You got some African in you and you need to figure it out and stop arguing with yourselves. But in America, we have to take ownership of all the things that we did do in the past, and we need to own everything we do from here on out. And say, this is ours. If you can take a piece of it, but you gotta compensate us properly. You gotta recognize where it came from. You ain't going. They're not Bo Derek braids. You've been doing that. They're like, Kim Kardashian. They come up with cornrows. Like, stop doing that. Like that. We gotta cut that out.
How do you start?
Do you feel that it's harder because, like, say in Haiti, they have their own land. Like they have. I know they share with the Dominican Republic, but like they have their own country that they have that's theirs. We are mixed. We are a mixed country.
We
don't have.
We need to start. This is our land.
I know, but it's white people.
This is our land.
They call us Black Americans, and then they're just Americans, like African Americans.
And that's because we let that happen. We have to start saying, this is our land, and this is what we created.
So and
we start running with it.
Well, we have to take. Again, it's the same concept. You have to take ownership. We have to own land. Absolutely. We've never been able to own land and that was intentional because when you own, first of all,
we came here as slaves.
We came here, and this is why it's a huge journey. But even white people in the Constitution was written, if you ain't own land, you ain't need nothing. Like that. So land ownership is key to being to having power. So we have to start buying land. We have to start building our own communities where we actually run it because that's where strength comes from.
Remember before segregation, we had like Black Wall Street. These things, these places were up and running.
Absolutely.
Burned down.
That's one of the biggest fears
in the country. The economy was like bad for us.
It was.
It was twofold. I mean, there were positive aspects of it, but the problem was so many the affluence in communities. Like if you were wealthy and you were rich and you were able to get out, you use that as an escape clause. Like, so now, right, the kids in the community they don't see the doctor that
absolutely.
They don't see the lawyer. They don't. Now this community doesn't have the same amount of wealth because they moved out into what happened was the American dream was a white dream, and black people bought in. And I think now we're starting to wake up and be like, yo, that was not meant for us.
Yeah.
So we got to create our own dream, and that's where we're finally coming to. But it took
it's tough to have a dream when you didn't have, it's like when you pull yourself up with your bootstraps.
You ain't got no boots.
Put out, we have no boots.
Yeah, we ain't got no
We
boots.
started from zero, literally zero. We didn't have slave money that help us get
We didn't
there.
have nothing.
Nothing.
They
So,
gave us. There was no.
and so now, even now, we're so used to fighting for our own existence. It's hard to get back. You're fighting to keep your own, but we have to start looking back and pulling.
What if a person identifies themselves with more than one race?
What do you mean?
Because they're maybe biracial, or what should they do?
You're considered black in this
Yeah, I
country.
feel like.
But what if they don't see themselves? Because I think that you can choose.
I think that's.
What if they don't
I
see
don't feel
themselves?
you
You could try to.
You can choose.
America
gonna choose
lets you know who you are.
Well, America can choose, but if I have a mother who happens to be white and a father who happens to be black, they're both equally important to me. And both.
We're not
So-
saying that. We're saying that.
So I don't consider
You're gonna
myself
get
It's
as
the
still
black
a stigma.
experience,
Yeah, it's still a
though.
stigma
Right.
about who you are.
Yeah, your experience will be a black experience in America.
Now, in maybe
Unless
50
you
years,
can
might be a little different because this is blending.
Yeah, it's starting to blend. But
Everybody-
as somebody who
everybody
is,
black.
no one ever knew
Right.
what I was. Like my whole life, everyone was like, "What are you?" I'm like, "I'm black."
Yeah.
But what else?
Right.
I'm black. Dog. Like, what do you want me to say?
Yeah.
Like you don't. There comes a time where you don't really get to make that choice. Like the cops will still get scared.
Absolutely. Like,
And that's where
like I said, if we were in a car and the cop stopped and said, "Nigga, get out," he's talking to both of us.
Right. I got.
You're not
I
talking to
got-
me.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm gonna have to step out too.
Yeah.
Although I'm not
I'm
stepping
gonna
out.
step out.
I'm not
So you don't think we get to choose our own culture and have ownership over it? Is
I
that
think
what
you
you're
choose
saying?
your culture, but
You can
not
choose.
you're
You can
black.
try to
choose your culture as far as what.
Because if
Like,
I'm
it should be brought
biracial
up
and I'm bought,
You can-
So like,
Okay.
let's say I'm
Joriana-
black and I'm
like
Asian,
Joriana right
you
now.
know.
She definitely has, she's Spanish, well, Puerto Rican, excuse me, don't get mixed up. Puerto Rican and black.
Mhm.
So it does get confusing for her sometimes. Like, well, what am I? What am I? And
She's black.
Yeah.
And
Well, no, you can do both.
you definitely you are
I'm Puerto
Zoriana.
Rican.
You are mixed. You have
She's,
this and this, and you will celebrate them both.
yeah, but
You will celebrate them both.
Yeah, I don't
But
think you have to
understanding,
choose.
yeah, you don't really have to. You celebrate them both.
But if you're talking
But,
about being black and white, though, like America will make you live the black experience.
But I could clearly look at okay, in your example, if I look at you, I may not know where you're from. I
Right.
can say, oh, he's Dominican, he's
Right.
Hispanic, he can be Arab. You never know. So if the world doesn't see you in that light, like they're confused, do you still get to
Well,
choose that you're a black man?
That's why